His question is, what is Yesh Ayin and how is it related to Atzmos? Is that it?
Yeah, and yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, pretty good.
The closest thing, and if you think into it, it is an appropriate approach, then it encapsulates the principle. We say all the time that a human being, last night we discussed it at great length, a human being's presence in this world has a quality of reality. What does that mean? That his presence is a must presence. It's part and parcel of the reality of the world. Without him, the world is not a world. And with him, the world is a world. To elaborate on this, you always bring down all the various things that we, as human beings, recognize. Because that's who we are. We have a real presence. That if you are at a wedding, I mean, you're not invited, something's missing. You don't feel yourself. This is not real for you. Real for you is that you are where you belong. I don't belong, but nobody cares if I eat or I don't eat. That's not for the human being. That's for the dog. This is initially this is in the initial creation of the human being. When God created the human being, he had a completely different plan for the human being than for everything else. Everything has its particular function, particular service, contribution to the world. The human being is not a contributor to the world. He is the world. He's the one who makes the world worthwhile to create. How? He doesn't really contribute much. The animals, as the Pasuk Rav is Bekiach Shoir, that if you want to have a field and the field should produce produce, you need an ox to plow it. A human being cannot plow it, cannot make the field grow. In Halacha it says that the Ikir of the Soda is the Shoir. Today, we have substituted the shoyer with machinery and so forth, but this is what makes the field productive. That's in terms of making the world run and work. But what is it about? What makes it worthwhile? What gives it a reality perspective? Reality perspective is exclusively in the purview, in the domain of the human being. No other creature even appreciates that. This is the principle of sechel, which is a derivative and reflection of the nefesh. Nefesh is a godly presence. And as we always explain, in a human being, in every creature there is a nefesh. But there's a fundamental difference between the human nefesh and lahavdil all others, and particularly in how the nefesh functions in a human being and in all the others. The others, the nefesh is totally reduced to the body function. It gives life to the body. That's what the nefesh is. And in our terminology, it means it creates a living body, but primarily it's body. But it's a living body. And to that, the Chassidus brings down from Marizal, from the Eitz Chaim, that Tanya says that in everything there's a nefesh. In a doimim there's a nefesh called nefesh hadoimemes. Perhaps we'll have a chance to touch on this once when nefesh hadoimemes. But in everything there's a nefesh. Actually, it's a complete derivative, direct derivative of what we are learning. That even after the kav, there is an element of ein sof. That's nefesh. How is that? What's the relationship? On the body level, everything that exists in the body has a functional result. You eat, and therefore you have means to subsist. The nefesh does not eat, does not need to be refurbished. It's godly. It's real in and of itself. It's reflective of the Motzei Rishon, that doesn't have a source and doesn't need any substantiation. This is something which is extremely difficult for us to conceptualize because it's not a worldly concept. It's a godly concept. It's a godly reality. And the only way we can relate to it is through emunah, through chokhmah. In emunah, in our esem hanefesh, we have that sense. The Rambam says, the first beginning of chokhmah is to recognize and to know that there is a first being. First being is not something that you can explain up to sechel. Where does it come from? There is no source for it. There is no sechel justification for it. How do I know it? I know it because I have it. I have that sense. I'm a nefesh, reflecting this first being. Therefore, the human being, it's directly close to us. We experience it, and there are phenomena in the human being that we cannot explain at sechel, no matter how much you try. For example, like I said before, if you're at a wedding and you were not invited, you're out of place. Why? Explain to me. Why are you out of place? What's missing? You can't even take a morsel of food and under those circumstances. You feel like a dog. What is this inviting thing? The human being is reflective of the godly presence. He has a godly spirit. He is where he belongs. The world was given to him. This is what the human being is. Thus, this is what's called the essential presence in the world. This is what gives the world a real presence. And And this essential presence is reflected in many different ways. Again, to bring it down to the point where we ourselves sense it. We discussed this many, many times. Property ownership. There is a phantom difference between what's called the lion's turf and the human ownership. Ownership is something which is his by godly decree. It is his on a fundamental level. He doesn't have to protect it. He has to protect it because there's criminals, those who don't recognize the godly truth. But from a godly perspective, from reality, it's his. You can't infringe on that. How can anyone own a piece of the world? The answer is that he is on par. He has an element of fundamental reality, fundamental right of being in the world. He's not a visitor. He actually owns it, of course, by godly decree. But he owns it. This whole phenomenon that we're discussing and then some and then some and then some is all based on this principle, that all existence starts not from being created, but it starts from a motzi rishon, from a true amitis himotzi, the truth of his presence, like the Rambam describes. There is truth to existence that defies understanding. As we always explain, understanding is directly related to boundaries, to limits. It has to have a beginning. But this has no beginning. So there's no way for us to even approach it, to understand it. How do we understand it? How do we relate it? How do we know about it? Motzi rishon. Because we are motzi rishon. This is the inyan from Amunah. Amunah, this is a godly spark in us. And if we try to understand Amunah, we are canceling out Amunah. Thus, the principle of Yesh Me'ayin. Yesh Me'ayin means, essentially, it's a similar principle that you said, the Bashem says, Mokim Sheritzoyne Shalodem Shomhu. Where he wants to be, that's where he is. He defies completely the norms, the worldly norms. So if you want to be something, someplace, you have to walk there and get there. Why is it? Because the world is his, and if he wants, that's him. The want is a reality. The ritzoyne shalodom, the will of the human being, is not a will that is a result of some worldly circle. I'm hungry, so I want to eat. That's not what we're talking about. This is what we mentioned, a phenomenal thing, that the Rebbe asked the Goy, why do you eat? So that I would live. Where does he get that idea? What makes him eat? What brings a person to eat? He's hungry. All of a sudden, this Goy has senses. No, I'm eating because I want to live. What's life? You understand what life is? This does not come through sechel. I explained that this guy who lived in such close proximity to the Rebbe for many, many years, and despite the fact that he's a guy, despite the fact that his focus is on drinking a little more vodka, he senses that there is a life, that there's a reality in a person. This is yesh mayayin. When something happens without an explanation, without a trace. What brings it about? How did it come to be? Yesh mayayin is exclusively in the domain of the etzem, of atzmos, which means oil has already a content. Chesed, Gura, Tiferes, Hesed, some kind of a content. There's an explanation how it relates to things. Atzmos is something different. Like we said many times, you have to reflect on it. A person in his home, because it's his home, is automatically present in every room, in every floor, in every crack and crevice. He is present there. How is he present there? This is called the atzmos. This atzmiyus, again, it is not, we cannot conceptualize in sechel, because sechel is already a gili. Sechel is a hamshach. But sechel has the tip of the sechel, which is chokhmah. Sechel that is acquired not through the process of chokhmah is not sechel at all. Like I explained many times. There is sechel habhema, that's sechel hanikne, it's instinct. It's not sechel at all. Sechel is that which is a direct flow from the nefesh, and for the fact that the nefesh is an atzmi. There's no explanation what nefesh is. The reason it's not within sechel purview. It is our sechel, within our perception of sechel, the chokhmah, that if a person passes away, the neshama continues to live. What does that mean? What does that mean? There's a reality way beyond the observable and the experience. This is the Pshat Bereshis Bara Elokim, that the world represents a godly presence. Everything in the world is a miracle, because it's a godly presence. Like we're saying over here, that even that, it retains Gamkin B'Bchinas Ein Sof. Not only to be Ein Sof, but it also retains the union of Atzmos, the Koich Atzmos. This is reflected in the fact this is what enabled us as a nation to say Nasa v'Nishma. It's subservience. No, Nasa v'Nishma is much more profound than subservience. Nasa v'Nishma is our recognition of the godly reality way beyond its effect on the world. Nishma means I'll understand. I'll make sense of it. Nasa means I can't make sense. I don't need to make sense. There is no world. I'm directly related to that truth. Like I said by Avram, Keil Oilam. defying worldly parameters. We have, illustrations galore, and the important is, this is within our cognizance at the chokhmah level, not on the sechel level. Like I'm saying, pointing at a very simple thing. What is property ownership? Is sechel. What does it mean? I'm an invited guest at the chassan. Up your sechel. It's a human thing. It is sechel, but it's sechel at the tip of sechel. That's called chokhmah. In truth, this is behind the chokhmah. This is called the munah. Chokhmah has an element of gilui. A munah doesn't have an element of gilui. A munah, the word emunah means steadfast. This is steadfast. This is the human being. This is what begins the human being. This is the motivation in the human being. This is what starts him off. This is the first definition of a human being.
But some type of giver it is, because it talks to the person.
Because what?
It affects the person. It talks to the person.
It's sensed.
It relates to that.
It's sensed. It is mislabe. The gilu, the slapshus is not in any other part. This is in the highest, in the most sensitive part of the human being. This is in his brain, and the brain also does not have a full grasp on it. It's just it's forcing itself. It's you're giving him life without him knowing what is being given to him.
So what makes something given? Why is Chokhmah more given than Emunah?
Why is Chokhmah more what?
More given than Emunah.
Because Chokhmah comes down in what's called Mokim Zman. Like we say, in sight. Sight is also essentially based on Emunah, on the truth of existence. And yet sight encompasses at a glance an entire panorama. This is in a sense, this is the phenomenon of sight. That is Mokim Zman. And it would seem to us like we are really experiencing a grasping of this one, but it's not. Because the reason that we have this sight, the reason that it's real is because we sense the motivation. This is why this is real to us. Otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. So Chokhmah is the gilui of that nakuda.
Where does the Emunah come in?
Emunah comes from the nefesh.
No,
What?
viewing the panorama, seeing it from your...
No, it's not a panorama. Emunah is beyond panorama. Like I've said many times, the underlying principle of Chokhmah is that Chokhmah gives a person casualty in the sense there is such a thing as an absolute truth. This is why I'm able to relate to it. It's not really the experience of it. We're close to the end. I want to say a very phenomenal thing. A person is walking, or driving, or flying at great speeds. He knows that he's never going to run out of the reality of space, reality of the world. What is in this knowledge? How does he know? Maybe the next step you're going, it's going to be outside. There's no world. It's finished. The end of Mitzias. If you think in it, you will see that what we're actually perceiving is Mitzias is not Mitzias dependent. It's not Mitzias because it is there, but because the Motzorishim makes it happen right now. The Motzorishim will never stop making it. Wherever I go, he's going to give me more Mitzias. Therefore, it's never going to dissipate. That's in sechel. This is how sechel perceives it. Really, it's never going to end because the source never exhausts. Not because it's Metzias, it's not. But there's no such thing as infinite space. It cannot be. If it's space, space is composed of parts. There's no such thing as infinite number of parts. It cannot be. What is infinite? Infinite is that which gives it presence, the source, the Motzorish, the reality. That really provides a sense of infinity. This is Yesh Me'ayin. This whole Yesh, as I said, in this, that spans continue to expand as you go through it, is Me'ayin. Because the Rebbe wants the world to be, the Rebbe wants you to be. So wherever you are, he's going to give you more space. So we concluded yesterday that the oir, even though the oir is also aliyah tzimtzum, like kelim, but kelim is a different thing. Kelim are created to be their own mitzias. Detached from their source. Oir stays connected to the source, it's me'eno eser. Just want to reiterate something which we've been repeating lately because it is very clear. Like I said yesterday, sight is reflective of Chochmah. Sight is possible only because we have Chochmah. Sight is a completely different experience than any other faculty. To illustrate, when you touch an object, you touch the table, you touch this edge, you touch the physical, the wood from which the table is made. And then you can say, oh, the wood has a certain form, and it can be used in a certain way. But essentially, what you're touching is something which is a very, very, devoid of any sense, of any significance. Why is it there? Nothing. It just happens to be there. Sight is a completely different experience. When you see a table, you see the table in full context. Not wood and the form and the table and the place where it is. In full context. The table to sight means a table that human beings are using in a besmedrash, exactly the full context, the full reality of it. This is what sight means. The reality of this phenomenon, rather than its keli. Why? Because sight is like chokhmah, which is connected to the nefesh. Nefesh only knows reality. And this is why insight, that's what you relate to. Like I mentioned last night, that if you have a picture hanging on the wall, and it's out of kilter, it's not properly aligned, it bothers you. It's the same. You see the picture, what's the difference? Because in sight you don't see just the picture. You see the reality, and the reality is misrepresented. That's why it bothers you. Okay?
Okay.
Now we have to wake up to our chokhmah. Okay, have a great day. Fine.